August 15th, 2001. The frigid, inky depths of the Barents Sea pressed in on Captain Dmitry Volkov. Suspended 108 meters below the surface, bathed in the harsh glare of his helmet lights, he was meticulously securing the cutting frame to the mangled bow section of the K-141 Kursk. The atmosphere was thick with the chilling silence of the abyss, broken only by the steady hiss of his rebreather and the distant creak of the heavy lift vessel Mayo above. He had been a deep-sea diver for over 2 decades, countless hours spent in hostile environments, but the Kursk was different. It felt heavy. As he tightened a final clamp near the torpedo tubes, a distinct, rhythmic tapping echoed through the water, seeming to originate from inside the massive, distorted pressure hull. It wasn't the shifting of twisted metal, nor the groan of the deep-sea currents. It was deliberate, resonant, like a hammer is striking steel in a desperate pattern. Volkov froze, his heart thumping against his ribs. Then a voice, faint but clear, crackled through his comms, a voice not from the surface, not from his team. It was ragged, distorted by the static, yet unmistakably human, whispering, "Help us, the truth." Simultaneously, the powerful lights on his helmet flickered wildly, threatening to plunge him into absolute darkness, and the water around him seemed to thicken, blurring the outline of the submarine, as if a presence was rising from its shattered shell. When he finally surfaced, pulled onto the deck of the Mayo by his worried crew, Volkov was visibly shaken, his face pale beneath the grime. He offered no coherent explanation, only a chilling whispered declaration. "They're still in there." "They're trying to tell us something." The tragedy of the K-141 Kursk, an Oscar II-class nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine, remains one of the most haunting maritime disasters of the modern era. Launched in 1994, it was the pride of the Russian Northern Fleet, a behemoth of steel and advanced technology designed to be virtually unsinkable. On August 12, 2000, during naval exercises in the Barents Sea, the Kursk, with 118 crew members aboard, suffered a catastrophic incident. At 11:28 a.m. local time, 2 powerful explosions, mere minutes apart, ripped through the forward compartments. The first, a smaller blast, likely caused by a faulty Type 65 torpedo igniting in its tube, was followed almost immediately by a much larger explosion, detonating the remaining torpedoes in the magazine. The submarine, crippled and mortally wounded, plunged to the seabed, settling at a depth of 108 meters. The coordinates, 69 degrees 40 minutes north, 37 degrees 35 minutes east, marked not just a geographical point, but a watery grave. The world watched in agonizing suspense as Russia launched a desperate and ultimately failed rescue attempt. Initial refusal of international assistance, then the slow acceptance of foreign expertise from British and Norwegian teams, highlighted a desperate struggle against time and the unforgiving deep. All 118 crew members perished. A post-mortem analysis revealed that 23 sailors had survived the initial explosions, taking refuge in the submarine's aft 9th compartment. They lived for several days in the freezing darkness, their oxygen slowly depleting, their final hours meticulously documented in a note left by Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Kolesnikov. The sheer scale of the loss, compounded by the controversy surrounding the delayed and ultimately unsuccessful rescue efforts, left a deep scar on the Russian nation and its navy. The decision was made to salvage the wreckage, not only to recover the bodies of the sailors and classified equipment, but also to ascertain the precise cause of the disaster. This monumental undertaking, named Project Regain, began in October 2001, employing the Dutch heavy lift vessel Mayo. The conditions for the recovery operation were nothing short of nightmarish: freezing Arctic waters, crushing pressures, near-zero visibility often obscured by sediment, and a colossal, mangled wreckage, still holding the potential for unexploded ordnance. It was into this deep, dark, and dangerous tomb that the Russian salvage divers descended. In the spiritual traditions of Russia and maritime folklore worldwide, the sea is often seen as a powerful, ancient entity that gives up its dead reluctantly. Drowned souls, particularly those who met a violent or unexpected end, are often believed to be restless, unable to find peace, or transition to the afterlife until their stories are told or their unfinished business resolved. In Russian folklore, while creatures like rusalki are more associated with rivers and lakes, the broader concept of water spirits can encompass the ocean's depths, embodying the cold, indifferent power of the abyss. More pertinently, the Russian Orthodox tradition holds a strong belief in the spiritual weight of a violent death, often leading to the concept of živie mrtveci, living dead, or zakliatie dushi, cursed or bound souls, not zombies in the Western sense, but spirits tied irrevocably to the place and circumstances of their demise. These souls, denied proper burial or resolution, might be compelled to reenact their final moments or desperately seek to reveal the truth of their tragedy. Sailors, a famously superstitious lot, often spoke of the ghosts of lost ships and crews, of vessels that became floating tombs, their former inhabitants forever tied to the steel. The Kursk, a state-of-the-art submarine that became an airtight steel coffin for 118 men, offered a terrifyingly literal manifestation of this concept. It was not merely a sunken wreck, it was a vast cold sepulchre, a silent witness to a tragedy whose full truth remained shrouded in official obfuscation and the crushing depths of the Barents Sea. For these trapped souls, their vessel was not a path to the afterlife, but a prison binding them to a final, desperate attempt to communicate what truly transpired in their last agonizing moments. The core diving team assigned to the Kursk recovery operation was comprised of some of Russia's most seasoned deep-sea specialists. Leading the dive operations was Captain Dmitry Volkov, a man of quiet authority and immense experience, initially pragmatic to a fault. His second-in-command, Chief Diver Sergei Lebedev, was a by-the-book veteran whose calm demeanor rarely wavered. Junior diver Mikhail Petrov, the youngest member of the team, was visibly nervous, his sensitivity making him more susceptible to the psychological pressures of the mission. Commander Andrei Kuznetsov, overseeing surface operations from the Mayo, was a stern and rigid officer determined to maintain military order and dismiss any reports that deviated from the official narrative. Early October 2001, the initial dives commenced. The work was arduous, each descent a battle against crushing pressure and freezing water. The divers, burdened by heavy equipment and limited visibility, focused on the immediate tasks, mapping the wreckage, attaching cutting wires, and preparing the lift points. Reports of strange sensations began to trickle in almost immediately. Divers reported extreme, localized cold spots, brief flashes of light not accounted for by their lamps, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. These were initially dismissed by Kuznetsov as standard symptoms of nitrogen narcosis or extreme exhaustion, common in such challenging environments. "Your minds are playing tricks," he'd declare over the comms. "Focus on the mission." By mid-October, the phenomena grew more distinct. Mikhail Petrov, usually diligent, became increasingly withdrawn. On October 17th, after a particularly long dive to the Kursk's mangled engine room, he reported hearing whispers on his comms system, voices not from control, but from within the static. He described them as faint, desperate, calling out names: Kravchenko, Rudolph, Kuznetsov. The commander, maintaining his rigid skepticism, attributed it to faulty comms or Petrov's growing stress. Petrov refused subsequent dives, citing overwhelming fatigue, though his eyes betrayed a profound fear. He was quietly removed from active rotation. Sergei Lebedev, a man known for his unflappable calm, experienced his own unsettling encounter on October 24th. While meticulously attaching heavy recovery lines to the Kursk's bow section, he felt a distinct icy grip on his gloved arm. He whirled around, expecting to see a team member or a piece of debris, but there was nothing in the murky water. Then, from deep within the mangled torpedo compartment, came a clear, rhythmic thump-thump-thump echoing through the steel. It sounded unmistakably like an SOS signal, a submariner's desperate plea. Lebedev, shaken to his core, immediately reported it. Commander Kuznetsov, though clearly unnerved by Lebedev's uncharacteristic distress, again offered a rationalization. Ice shifting, Sergei, or structural groaning. The wreck is unstable. Then came Captain Volkov's experience on August 15th, the hook of our story. The rhythmic tapping, the voice whispering, "We need help, not rescue, truth." His helmet lights flickering, the water thickening around him. He surfaced, deeply disturbed, his usual composure shattered. His official dive report, he would later discover, had been heavily edited by the Fleet Command, omitting any mention of the sounds or voices. "They want silence," he noted in his personal log, "but the deep will not give it." By mid-November, the phenomena became more frequent and intensely personal. Divers began to report seeing fleeting figures in the murky, phosphorescent water, shapes moving within the flooded compartments, too quick to be identified, too deliberate to be mere currents. These were often described as humanoid but shimmering, like heat haze in the water. Some divers complained of an unbearable pressure, a feeling of being watched, even within their robust suits, as if eyes were boring into them from the darkness. More unsettlingly, a faint, sickly sweet smell of decay, mixed with stale air and oil, began to be reported by multiple divers, even through their rebreathers. A theoretically impossible sensory experience underwater. "It's the smell of death," one diver, Lieutenant Oleg Smirnov, murmured, after surfacing, his face pale green. "It's inside the suit. It's inside my head." The most harrowing incident involved junior diver Ivanenko on November 18th. He was working alone on the Kursk's aft compartments, a section known to have contained survivors. His comms suddenly blared with a high-pitched shriek, followed by Ivanenko's panicked screams. "A face!" A face pressed against the porthole, eyes staring out, dead but alive, pleading. He described it as a young man's face, bruised and distorted, yet radiating an undeniable, desperate urgency. Ivanenko ascended in a blind panic, ignoring all decompression protocols, suffering severe decompression sickness upon reaching the surface. He survived, but his mind was broken. He spent weeks in the infirmary, raving about the faces in the dark and the ones who want to speak. His account, too, was dismissed as a severe case of nitrogen narcosis. Captain Volkov, deeply troubled by these escalating events, insisted on a solo inspection dive on November 25th, focusing on a newly exposed section near the command module, the heart of the submarine's operations. He moved methodically, his camera recording every detail. He found something chilling, a section of bulkhead with faint, irregular scratch marks, almost like attempts at writing, deep gouges in the steel. As he meticulously recorded them, he felt the crushing pressure of the deep suddenly intensify, not from depth changes, but from within the water itself. Then clearly, a voice, male, close in Russian, spoke directly into his ear, bypassing his comms. "Oni elgali, oni elgali." They lied. They lied. His external comms registered only static, but later, when his internal recorder was reviewed, a distorted, guttural whisper was faintly audible on the ambient audio track, seemingly emanating from the metal itself. As the voice faded, Volkov saw a shimmering outline, like heat haze in the water, coalesce near the shattered command center, a tall, vague figure. He retreated, leaving the scratch marks behind, a chilling testament to a final, desperate message. On December 1st, Commander Kuznetsov, visibly strained but still clinging to his military discipline, called a mandatory meeting for the remaining dive teams and medical personnel on the Mayo. He attributed all reports of strange occurrences, the voices, the cold, the apparitions, to a combination of deep-sea fatigue, prolonged isolation, carbon dioxide buildup in rebreathers, and a shared hallucination brought on by the immense psychological trauma of the mission. He had brought in a highly decorated naval psychologist, Dr. Ivan Morozov, who confidently dismissed the divers' accounts as classic trauma responses, vivid manifestations of grief and stress. Volkov and Lebedev tried to argue, presenting their increasingly unsettling evidence, but they were overruled. Kuznetsov concluded, "Gentlemen, what you are experiencing is perfectly natural under these conditions. Dismiss these fantasies." Yet, even as Dr. Morozov spoke, a low, rhythmic tapping, like an echoing hammer on steel, began to resonate through the very hull of their surface vessel, Mayo, directly above where the Kursk lay. The sound persisted, undeniable, for an entire minute before fading into silence. "Doctor!" Morozov's confident facade crumbled. His face went stark white. The silence that followed was far more terrifying than the tapping. The escalating and undeniable phenomena surrounding the Kursk recovery ultimately necessitated an intervention beyond conventional military or psychological frameworks. Unbeknownst to the general public or even most naval personnel, a quiet, discreet request was made to Father Anatoly, a highly respected Russian Orthodox priest known for his ministry to naval families. Father Anatoly was also an unofficial, unacknowledged consultant on cases the military deemed unusual, situations that defied purely scientific explanation. He was a pragmatic man, grounded in faith, but open to the deeper mysteries of the human soul and the spiritual world. Upon his arrival on the Mayo, Father Anatoly immediately noted a palpable heaviness in the air, a spiritual chill that seemed to emanate from the ocean itself. He meticulously reviewed the divers' reports, listened to the distorted audio recordings, and spent hours in quiet conversation with Captain Volkov and Chief Diver Lebedev, sensing their genuine distress and the conviction behind their words. He did not dismiss their experiences as madness. Instead, Father Anatoly spoke of dushi umashik, the souls of the departed, who, due to violent, unexpected death or unfulfilled duties, cannot find peace. He explained that the deep sea, a watery grave, could act as a spiritual anchor, binding these souls to the place of their demise. He spoke of the orthodox concept of unclean places, nechistoye mesto, where sudden, catastrophic tragedies concentrate negative energy, thinning the veil between worlds. He noted the specific details reported by the divers, the rhythmic tapping, a common signal from trapped submariners, now a desperate plea from the other side, the calling of names, personal cries for recognition and remembrance, the fleeting faces in the murky water, perhaps vivid imprints of their last moments of suffering. These were not malevolent spirits, he argued, but desperate ones. They were trying to communicate the truth of what happened in their final moments, or what led to their tragic deaths, since the official narrative remained clouded and incomplete. Trapped in their steel coffin, their last agonizing hours replayed eternally, they sought desperately to be heard, to find resolution. Father Anatoly proposed a specific course of action, not an exorcism, but a series of blessings and memorials. He insisted that a full Panikida memorial service for the departed be performed not just on the surface vessel, but crucially also within the recovered sections of the submarine once they were lifted. This, he explained, was not merely for the comfort of the living, but to offer passage and release to the restless spirits, to acknowledge their suffering and allow them to finally find peace. He also emphasized the profound importance of public acknowledgement, a true, unvarnished accounting of all their suffering, not just the officially sanctioned, sanitized version of events. Only with the truth fully faced could these souls be truly at rest. While Commander Kuznetsov and the Fleet Command publicly maintained a scientific and rational stance, Father Anatoly's recommendations were quietly, almost surreptitiously, followed. A memorial service was held at sea, though details of the within-the-submarine ritual remained classified, hidden behind layers of military secrecy. The aftermath of the Kursk disaster and the subsequent salvage operations left an indelible mark on all involved, particularly those who descended into the depths. Captain Dmitry Volkov, deeply affected by what he had witnessed and experienced, continued his diving career, but with a profound sense of melancholy and a heightened empathy for those lost at sea. He became a quiet, unofficial advocate for naval safety and transparency, often stating to his closest family that he knew what really happened down there, though he never elaborated publicly, bound by oaths and a self-imposed silence. His eyes, however, always carried the distant, haunting reflection of the abyssal darkness. Chief diver Sergei Lebedev, shaken by the breach of his logical world, retired from service shortly after the salvage operation was completed. He suffered from chronic insomnia and developed severe claustrophobia, an unbearable fear of enclosed spaces and the vast, cold emptiness of the deep ocean. Junior diver Mikhail Petrov and Ivanenko, both of whom had experienced the most direct and traumatic spectral encounters, were honorably discharged from service for psychological reasons, their medical reports and testimonies meticulously suppressed. They lived troubled lives, plagued by night terrors and the persistent feeling of being watched. They often spoke of cold, dark places and pleading voices, their accounts dismissed by official channels as lingering effects of extreme stress and psychological trauma. Their stories, however, found their way into whispers among naval families. The official cause of the Kursk disaster remained consistently attributed to a torpedo malfunction, with no public deviation from this narrative. The spectral events experienced by the divers were aggressively suppressed, labeled as mass hysteria or psychological side effects of deep-sea pressure and isolation. However, behind closed doors, Father Anatoly's recommendations were indeed quietly followed. A comprehensive memorial service was held at sea, acknowledging the immense loss. The most extraordinary step was the discreet blessing and ritual performed within the recovered sections of the Kursk itself, particularly the intact stern before it was dismantled. These rituals remain highly classified. To this day, security around the stored sections of the Kursk wreckage is exceptionally tight, more stringent than for other sensitive naval assets. Rumors persist within the Russian naval community of unusual sensor readings, inexplicable cold spots, or faint, disembodied sounds emanating from the massive steel sections now housed in secure facilities. Within the closed circles of the Russian Northern Fleet, a grim folklore has emerged surrounding the Kursk. Sailors whisper of the whispering steel or the crying coffin. New recruits are subtly warned away from discussing the Kursk disaster in certain tones, particularly at sea. For generations of fishermen and sailors in the Barents Sea, the area around the wreck site is considered a heavy place where compasses sometimes spin erratically and strange, distorted echoes carry on the deep currents. They avoid it, preferring longer, safer routes. The harrowing story of the 23 sailors found alive in the 9th compartment and their survival for days now carries an added, unspoken layer of spectral tragedy. They were not alone in their suffering in those final hours. Their struggle, their desperate desire to reveal the truth, resonates through the steel. The Kursk is not merely a wreck. It is a monumental tomb, a vast, cold prison, and a spectral witness. The souls of its crew, trapped by the sudden violence of their end and the silence that followed, may still be trying to deliver their final message. Thank you for joining. For this exploration of how the chilling tragedy of the K-141 Kursk may have left behind more than just mangled steel and official secrets. This story serves as a profound reminder that the depths of the ocean hold mysteries far beyond the reach of human technology, and that some deaths leave an echo that can never be silenced. It asks us to consider the powerful, lingering presence of the human spirit, especially when confronted by unresolved injustice and unacknowledged suffering. When the living cannot tell the full story, sometimes the dead, bound by their final moments, are compelled to try, forever tapping against the walls of their watery tomb. The Kursk stands as a monument not just to a naval disaster, but to the spectral weight of untold truths and unquiet souls, forever trapped in the crushing darkness of the Barents Sea. If you found this exploration into the shadows of history compelling, please consider liking this video, sharing it with those who appreciate the darker corners of our past, and subscribing to Dr. A Whisper of War for more journeys into the unexplained and the unsettling. Your comments and theories are always welcome below. Until next time, remember that the deepest secrets are not always buried in the earth, but sometimes rest in the cold embrace of the sea.